Hello, my name is Ed Wilcox. I'm the Watershed Research and Extension Associate at Kentucky State University as part of the Cooperative Extension Program. I'm here today to talk to you about recreational opportunities in Pool 4 of the Kentucky River. The Kentucky River is a wonderful resource that's available for all people to experience. There's lots of opportunities to boat, fish, float, paddle, all kinds of things that people can do on the Kentucky River. If any of these things seem like they may be a bad idea to you, that they may be unhealthy for you to participate in, you may not have the most recent information about the river. You can, one of the places that you can go to on the Kentucky River is the Riverview Trail. In that trail, you can have some educational opportunities. There's educational signage that tells you what's going on around the river and some historical information about the river. But it's also just a great location to see what's along the river as well, as you can see from this photo. The other two photos underneath, the historical marker information, there's more than these two along the Riverview Trail. And I encourage you to go and look for any of them and learn more about the river and what's around it. But as I mentioned, you can go to the Kentucky River for boating opportunities, for fishing or angling opportunities, and just to observe wildlife. The picture of the boats here, it's an example of some steam ships that came into Frankfurt for an event, and people can go and see them whenever there's events like that. The bridge picture, that's the mouth of Benson Creek, and if you aren't aware, that's a location where a 93-pound blue catfish was pulled out of the Kentucky River. So there's great angling opportunities along Pool 4 of the Kentucky River. And in the lower right corner, that's just one of the wildlife opportunities that's available for people who recreate out on the river. So certainly take advantage if you're able to get down to the river and recreate on the river. There are other educational opportunities available on the Kentucky River. This is the Kentucky State University Kentucky River Thoroughbred. It's the educational vessel that the university operates. And you can certainly reach out to the university. I'll provide some contact information at the end of this presentation for who you can contact to set up an educational cruise. And we look forward to having you cruise with us. And there's a long history of environmental legislation that governs water quality. So if you're concerned that the water quality may be a little suspect, just understand that there's a lot of legislation that's in place taking care, or that's meant to take care of the river. So starting in 1948, well, even before 1948 there was legislation, but in 1948 the Federal Water Pollution Control Act was enacted, and it wasn't until 1972 that an initial amendment came through, and that amendment became what is now known as the Clean Water Act. That was the transition from the Federal Water Pollution Control Act to the Clean Water Act. And there was an additional amendment in 1977 as well as 1987. And again, those were still part of the Clean Water Act. But there's additional federal regulations that have come into play. There's a Code of Federal Regulations chapters that discuss water quality and even uses of water. In part of the Clean Water Act, as well as in those federal codes, there's information that discusses what water quality standards are to be in effect, that there should be no anti-degradation to the water, and just uses that may continue that are listed under state standards. In the Clean Water Act, if you're familiar with it, or even if you're not, the general principle of the Clean Water Act is that the nation's waters are supposed to be fishable and swimmable. They're supposed to be maintained for aquatic resource use as well as recreation. So fishable and swimmable is how that usually gets translated to most people. And once we get down to the state standards, 401 KAR 1031, those are the surface water quality standards, and this is the actual language of the standard. And it says surface waters are not to be aesthetically or otherwise degraded by substances that settle to form objectionable deposits, so that'd be something that makes like a slime or a sludge on the bottom of the river, or on other objects that are in the river. There should be no slime or sludge. And things aren't supposed to be introduced to the water that will float as debris, scum, oil, or other matter to form a nuisance. And this image here is a demonstration of a debris mat. And the debris is mostly woody material that's washed in from a riverbank due to flooding. But you can also see that there's plenty of plastic that's been washed in. And some people think that this plastic may be just thrown directly into the river, but more often it is just thrown on the side of the road and then it washes into the river. But these are considered floating debris that it becomes a nuisance visually and or aesthetically, and most people don't find that very attractive. And it's also, as the plastic photodegrades, it tends to become toxic to the wildlife in the water. Any other substances that are not supposed to go into the water, substances that would produce objectionable color, odor, taste, or turbidity are not to be introduced to the water, and that could be something as vile as gasoline or diesel, kerosene. Any of those will add an objectionable color, odor, taste, or turbidity to the water. And just to explain, turbidity is how clear or cloudy the water is. Otherwise, substances that may be introduced to the water should not injure or chronically or acutely toxic or produce adverse physiological or behavioral responses in people or wildlife. So shorthand, it shouldn't be poisonous or behaviorally affecting to wildlife or people in the water. And it should not produce an undesirable aquatic life or result in the dominance of nuisance species. And one of the things that can happen in waterways is harmful algal blooms due to the introduction of nutrients. And that produces a lot of algae that can result in some taste and odor issues to water, as well as make it a little more difficult to recreate in the water. And any substance that can cause fish flesh tainting is also not to be introduced to the water. So as far as 401 KAR 1026, these are the designation of uses of surface waters. In Pool 4 of the Kentucky River, its designated uses, there's warm water aquatic habitat. And warm water aquatic habitat means that there should be warm water fishes that are able to reside there. Some examples from this slide, there's largemouth bass, freshwater drum, red ear sunfish, and other sunfishes like bluegills and warmouths, but also other families of fishes such as the sauger, as well as flathead catfish. And there's many more warm water aquatic fishes that can live in the river, but they're not on this slide. Many minnows or shads, gars, for example, all of those will also be able to live in Pool 4 of the Kentucky River. Some fish that aren't mentioned, but you may see them, are the cold water fishes such as the trouts. They can live in the river, but they won't thrive because the water is not the right condition for them. But otherwise, the warm water fishes should be able to survive and thrive in Pool 4 of the Kentucky River. The second item is that it should be used for primary contact recreation. And primary contact recreation means that you should be able to go swimming. You should be able to be wholly submerged. That means your head will be underneath the water. You should be able to do that. And then there's also secondary contact recreation. And this is where you're going to end up having incidental contact with the water. So incidental contact means that you can go boating, where you may get splashed with the water, but even personal watercraft, that counts as boating as well. You can go wading, as long as you don't fall down and wholly submerged, then that's still considered secondary contact recreation. Or if you decide to go fishing, that's where you may only come into incidental contact with the water as you reach into the water perhaps to pull out your catch. All of those are secondary contact recreation. And the river should be used for, or should be able to be used for domestic water supply. And that means that the water in the river should be of good enough condition that it can be drawn out and then processed to drinking water standards and then sent to people's homes through the city's infrastructure. And the image here is a picture of the Frankfurt Plant Board's water intake building. And there's a tube that comes out from that building and goes out into the river, and it draws water to be processed into their treatment plant. But drinking water supply, the water should be at least clean enough to pull out of the river for further processing. And then, while this isn't a official designated use, it's assumed to be a designated use because fish flesh is not to be tainted, so you should be able to eat the fish. So fish consumption is presumed designated use. So then a question may be, if you can, if they're indicating that you should be able to eat the fish, can you actually eat the fish? And the answer is actually yes, you can. But be aware that there are some fish consumption advisories associated with not only the nation's waters, or just Pool 4 of the Kentucky River, all of the Commonwealth or the state's waters do have fish consumption advisories associated with them. And the fish consumption advisories indicate how much of each type of fish you can safely consume. And if you're interested in learning more about the fish consumption advisories, if you go to Kentucky's Energy and Environment Cabinet, and then under the water section, there's the fish consumption advisories listed there. There's the URL on the screen that you can use, or you can just type in Fish Consumption Advisory Kentucky, and you'll find that link as well. An alternative location to find the fish consumption advisories is the the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources webpage. And again, the URL for that is at the bottom of the page, that you can access that as well. Or use a search criteria, again, Fish Consumption Advisories Kentucky, and both of these URLs will come up. So since most people don't have sophisticated equipment that tell them numeric values for what the water quality is, you can kind of use a rule of thumb to decide when it may be safe to recreate on the river. The upper left image there, it shows that the river has a brownish color to it. That's usually indicating that there's been a rain event recently, and a lot of water has washed silt and sediment into the waterway. And along with that silt and sediment may also come other materials such as manure from livestock operations. And in that manure there's going to be some bacteria called fecal coliforms. And if people were to ingest those, generally people can become sick. So if it's the day of a rain event, or if it's raining, or several days after a rain, and the river has a brownish color to it, you may want to not consider getting into the river, especially if you have an open wound or a compromised immune system. But if you've gone swimming and had no adverse impacts previously and you feel comfortable doing it, that will be up to you to decide if you want to keep doing it. Otherwise, if you look in the lower right, or excuse me, the lower left image, that's more of a greenish color that the river typically has when there's not been a rain event. And it may not look like you have some pretty good visibility, but you can generally get about 18 inches of visibility, and that's the image on the right there. It shows you about how deep you can see through the water. And if there's about that much clarity to the water, usually the sunlight will penetrate through the water and help eradicate the fecal coliforms and make it slightly safer to go swimming. So again, these are just some general rules of thumb if you don't have any sophisticated equipment to do any water quality testing. Don't go during a rain event or several days after a rain event. You may want to consider going when the water has changed to more of a greenish color. And when you do go out to recreate on the river, certainly observe and obey any signage that may be out there. It's out there for your benefit. And just to explain some of the signage, the image to the left, it indicates a no wake zone. Wake is pretty much if you're in a boat and you're pushing water to the side, you're going to leave a wake of water behind you. And that water can end up pushing against other things. Anyone who has a boat is responsible for what happens in their wake. So if you go zipping by a boat dock too fast and that wake damages the dock or other boats tied to that dock, you may be responsible. So certainly observe signage that's out there. And you can see kind of in the center pictures there's swim at your own risk signs. Certainly observe those signs. You can get out there and swim, but certainly be safe and where you choose to go swimming. And then in the upper right, there's a no swimming from a dock sign. That sign happens to be at the boat dock at the Riverview Park, so there is no swimming from that dock. Otherwise, you may end up seeing a warning sign like in the lower right corner. That's a combined sewer overflow image. And people should not swim or fish near the outfall of those combined sewer overflows. And if you're interested in learning more information about the condition of the river, say before you go to recreate on the river, there is a gauge that can give you some information about the water quality or the water conditions, and that will be, say, like flow and elevation, because that will kind of determine how safe it may feel to be out on the river. One of the places that you can get some information is the USGS National Water Information System. And if you go onto the web, you can use search criteria USGS 03287500 Frankfort, Kentucky, and that will bring up the gauge that's in. It's listed as being at Lock 4, but it's actually not there. But otherwise, you can also use the URL that's on the bottom of the screen there. But that information will give you some temperature information, flow rates, the gauge height, and you can kind of, once you have some index of being on the river, you can gauge what the conditions of the river are going to be like based on the flow as well as the gauge height, and that can help you decide if it's going to be safe for you to recreate on the river. If you're interested in getting more of a forecast for what the river is going to be like, you can also go to the National Weather Service's Advanced Hydrologic Prediction Service, and you'll want to make sure that if you get to a page that looks like this, make sure the tab all the way to the left that's labeled Hydrograph is the tab that's highlighted, and that will show this page right here. So where the line goes down the center of that graph and then to the left, that's current and past information, and then to the right of that line splitting the graph is forecasted information. And this forecast tends to be fairly accurate. So if you're planning a multi-day trip out on the river, this gauge will give you some information about how the river is going to be around the lock. But again, the gauge isn't actually at the lock. But the URL again for this location or this website is on the bottom of the page, but you can type in pretty much the same information for the previous gauge. Just look for the waterdata.usgs.gov URL. So this is an image of what that gauge looks like and kind of some surrounding features along the river. I highly encourage you to, if you're going to recreate on the river, go out and see if you can't find it. It's a neat experience. Certainly do not interact with the machinery or the gauge in any way, but it's just something neat to kind of go out and find. Kind of like finding things like even the historical markers if you're into finding those markers. So I hope this information has helped you in how you may feel about the Kentucky River, Pool 4 of the Kentucky River, and whether or not you may want to recreate on it. Certainly you can also reach out to other boaters and anglers or other people that may be recreating on the river to find out when they go, and that may help you decide if and when and where you would want to go to recreate on Pool 4 of the Kentucky River. And as I mentioned previously, this is some contact information if you're interested in cruising aboard the Kentucky River Thoroughbred. Again, my name is Ed Wilcox. I'm the Watershed Research and Extension Associate. My office phone number is listed there, and the URLs on the screen are also helpful in learning more about the boat and its programming. But if you would like to schedule a cruise, you can do that through our Facebook page. Once conditions are appropriate for cruising, we'll have a cruise schedule posted, and we look forward to having you cruise aboard the Thoroughbred with us. This has been a Kentucky State University Cooperative Extension Program. Thank you very much.